Right now, sitting on Gumtree and Facebook Marketplace, tucked behind sheds on rural properties, and quietly rusting in suburban driveways across this country, there are 5 four-wheel drives you can buy for under 15 grand that will mechanically outlast a brand new $90,000 LandCruiser. Not because Toyota builds a bad truck, they don't, but because the modern automotive industry has fundamentally changed what the word reliable actually means. And if you don't understand that shift, you are going to spend the next 7 years financing a vehicle that was engineered to expire the moment your warranty does. Let's start with the uncomfortable conversation that nobody in the Land Cruiser community wants to have at the campfire. The Land Cruiser is a legend, full stop. I'm not going to sit here and tell you otherwise because 20 years in the workshop has shown me what these trucks are genuinely capable of. I have personally worked on 200 series Land Cruisers with over 500,000 kilometers on the original drivetrain. I have seen 79 series workhorses come off Pilbara mining leases looking like they went 10 rounds with a bulldozer and the engine still pulled like a train. The Land Cruiser's reputation was not built by marketing departments. It was built by the people who drove them into places that had no name on a map and needed them to come back out. But here's the thing that the Land Cruiser forums and the YouTube comment sections do not want you to hear. The truck that earned that legendary reputation is not the truck they are currently selling you. The 200 series ended production in 2021. What replaced it is the 300 series, and the 300 series is a fundamentally different machine. It is powered by a twin turbocharged 3.3 litre V6 diesel. It is loaded with a 48 volt mild hybrid system. It has a 10-speed automatic gearbox. It has pre-collision systems, radar cruise control, lane departure warning, and enough electronic architecture to make a software engineer weep with joy and a bush mechanic weep with something else entirely. It is an extraordinary vehicle in controlled conditions. On a highway, in a national park, picking up the kids from school in Mossman, it is genuinely spectacular. But what happens when that DPF chokes up in the red center? What happens when the mild hybrid battery thermal management system gets confused by a river crossing? What happens at the 150,000 kilometer mark when the extended warranty has expired and the dealer service manager slides a quote across the desk that looks like a mortgage repayment? I will tell you what happens. The same thing that happens to every modern, highly complex diesel. It becomes expensive. Brutally, mercilessly expensive. And that is the gap. That is the exact gap that these 5 trucks are sitting in. Because while everyone else is financing complexity, you can buy mechanical simplicity for the price of a second-hand jet ski, and simplicity in the real world is what actually keeps you moving. Number 5. The GQ Nissan Patrol. 1988 to 1997 engine, the TB42. If you have spent any time around serious four-wheel drivers or outback station workers in this country, you already know the GQ Patrol. You probably know someone who owns one. You probably know someone who has owned 3. These trucks have a cult following in Australia that borders on religious, and once you understand the TB42 engine that powers them, you understand exactly why. The TB42 is a 4.2 litre naturally aspirated petrol 6-cylinder, cast iron block, 7 main bearings, a bottom end so overbuilt that Nissan used variations of this engine architecture in their commercial truck lineup simultaneously. Let me put that in plain English for you. Nissan took a commercial truck engine, dropped it into a 4-wheel drive wagon, and sold it to the Australian public for the price of a family car. And the Australian public, bless them, mostly ignored it in favour of the diesel variants, which means right now you can find TB42 powered GQ Patrols for between $4,000 and $10,000, and when you find one that has been maintained, what you are actually buying is a mechanical cockroach in the best possible sense of that phrase. The TB42 has effectively no upper rev limit that you will ever reach in normal use. It makes its power low and it makes it lazy. There is no turbocharger to fail. There is no DPF to choke. There is no EGR valve to sludge up. There is no variable geometry this or electronically controlled that. There is a throttle cable, a mechanical distributor, a carburetor on the early models, or a basic fuel injection system on the later ones, and an engine that will happily sit at 3,000 RPM for 12 hours straight, hauling a loaded trailer across the Nullarbor without complaint. I have personally seen TB42 GQ Patrols tick over 450,000 kilometers. Original block, original gearbox. The owner, a fencing contractor from outside Longreach, told me he changes the oil every 5,000 kilometers, uses the cheapest acceptable quality filter he can find, and has never once opened the bottom end. That truck has made him money every single working day for 11 years. Now, the weak points. And I am going to be honest with you here because that is the entire point of this video. The TB42 drinks fuel like it is sponsored by the oil industry. If fuel economy is a priority for you, this is not your engine. Expect somewhere between 15 and 18 litres per 100 kilometres in real-world mixed driving. Fill it up, drive it, accept it as the tax you pay for mechanical immortality. The cooling system on high mileage examples needs attention. The thermostat housing and the radiator hoses harden and crack. Budget $300 and an afternoon and replace them when you buy the truck. Non-negotiable. Beyond that, check the front axle Burfield joints. On heavily used four-wheel drive examples, these wear and grease dries out. Replacement is about $400 a side and is a job any decent independent mechanic can do in a morning. Buy price right now. Between $4,000 and $10,000 for a clean example with reasonable service history. The ones sitting at $4,000 are usually cosmetically tired but mechanically fine. The ones sitting at $10,000 usually have a fresh set of tires and a roof rack the previous owner spent too much money on. Both are reasonable propositions. Number 4, the 80 series Toyota LandCruiser, 1990 to 1998, engine, the 18Z. Here is where the LandCruiser faithful in the comments are going to have a moment of conflict, because I'm about to tell you that a 25-year-old LandCruiser is a more mechanically sound long-term proposition than its modern descendant, and the reason is simple. Before Toyota got strangled by emissions regulations and shareholder profit targets, their engineers were allowed to build engines with one singular overriding priority: longevity, full stop. Nothing else. The 18Z is a 4.2-litre, naturally aspirated inline 6-cylinder diesel. It makes approximately 96 kilowatts of power. I know. You read that and you thought, that sounds slow, and it is. It is not going to win any races. It is not going to impress anyone at a set of traffic lights. What it is going to do is run. Continuously, reliably, predictably. For distances that would make a modern, common rail diesel engineer question his life choices. There is no turbocharger. There are no piezoelectric injectors. There is a pre-combustion chamber injection system that runs at relatively low pressure and is extraordinarily tolerant of fuel quality variation. This is not a small detail in the Australian context. If you are travelling through remote Queensland or Western Australia, the diesel coming out of a drum at a remote roadhouse is not always what you would call laboratory grade. The 1HZ does not care. It will burn it and keep going. Fleet operators understood this. Mining companies understood this. The 1HZ powered 80 series LandCruiser was an absolute staple of remote area fleet operations in Australia through the 1990s and into the 2000s. These trucks went to places where the nearest mechanic was 300 kilometers away and a breakdown was not an inconvenience. It was a genuine survival situation. Toyota built the 1HZ knowing this. They built it to be fixable with basic tools, to be understandable without a diagnostic computer, and to survive conditions that would reduce a modern four-wheel drive to an electronic brick. Now, I promised you the one fatal flaw. and here it is. The 1HZ has a documented head gasket weakness, specifically on examples that were run hot at any point in their life, or on trucks that have not had the coolant system maintained with the correct Toyota spec coolant chemistry. A blown head gasket on a 1HZ is not a catastrophic engine-ending event in the way it would be on a modern alloy engine. The block is cast iron. The damage is usually contained to the gasket itself and occasionally the head surface. A full head gasket replacement with a machined head surface costs between $2,000 and $3,500 at an independent specialist. On an engine that will otherwise run to 600,000 kilometers, that is a completely acceptable maintenance cost. Think of it like replacing the tires. It is just something you budget for. The other thing to check is the timing chain and tensioner on higher mileage examples. A rattle on cold start that disappears once warm is your signal. Budget $2,000 and sort it immediately. Let it go, and you are looking at valve train damage that will cost you considerably more. By price right now, clean, well-documented 80 series diesels are between $8,000 and $15,000. Yes, the top end touches 15 grand, which technically nudges my stated budget ceiling, but I am including it because a well-maintained 1HZ 80 series is one of the most asymmetrically valued vehicles in the Australian used market. You are not buying a 25-year-old truck. You are buying a mechanical platform with potentially 300,000 kilometers of remaining engine life. Price it accordingly. Number 3. The Mitsubishi Pajero NL and NM generation 1998 to 2002, engine the 4M41. Right. This is the one that the Pajero faithful have been waiting for, and this is the one that the people who have never owned a Pajero are about to roll their eyes at. Give me 60 seconds before you skip ahead. The Mitsubishi Pajero has an image problem in Australia that has absolutely nothing to do with its mechanical reality. The image problem is this. People associate the Pajero with a certain type of owner. You know the type. Drives it to Bunnings once a fortnight, never takes it off a sealed road, considers a gravel car park an off-road experience. That ownership demographic is real, and it has convinced a significant portion of the four-wheel drive community that the Pajero is a soft roader in a box frame costume. That reputation is completely unfair to the 4M41 engine, which is one of the finest medium displacement diesel engines ever fitted to a passenger four-wheel drive sold in Australia. The 4M41 is a 3.2 litre direct injection turbocharged four-cylinder diesel. And before you stop me and say, wait, you said no twin turbo complexity, the 4M41 uses a single turbocharger running at conservative boost pressure. It is not the frenetic, overstressed twin turbo arrangement of a modern four-cylinder trying to move a 2.5 ton truck. It is a commercial heritage diesel that happens to produce enough power to make the Pajero genuinely enjoyable to drive. It is a meaningful distinction. Mitsubishi derived this engine's architecture from their light commercial vehicle platform, the Canter truck, the Rosa bus. This is not a passenger car engine that got repurposed for four-wheel drive duty. It went in the other direction. They took commercial truck DNA and refined it for a wagon application. The result is an engine with cast iron cylinder liners, a robust bottom end, and injectors that run at significantly lower pressure than modern common rail systems. This is an engine designed for commercial abuse. I mentioned earlier that I once drove a Pajero across the Gibb River Road and had a spiritual experience that is only a slight exaggeration. It was an NM with 190,000 kilometers on it. The owner had done nothing exotic in terms of maintenance, regular oil changes, coolant flushes, a set of tires every 60,000 kilometers. The engine pulled the corrugated dirt sections with complete composure. No drama, no overheating, no warning lights, just momentum. The head gasket conversation. Yes, it is real on the 4M41, specifically on examples that were run consistently hard while towing, or on trucks where the coolant has not been maintained. It is the same fundamental physics as the 1HZ situation. cast iron block, alloy head, thermal cycling, keep the coolant fresh, keep an eye on the temperature gauge, and the head gasket is a manageable rather than catastrophic risk. Fix it properly when it presents using a quality multi-layer steel replacement gasket, and it rarely comes back. The other area to inspect is the front diff and the Super Select four-wheel drive transfer case. These are genuinely excellent systems when maintained. They are genuinely expensive to repair when not. Fluid changes every 40,000 kilometers are not optional. Do it, document it, and the transfer case will outlast you. By price, clean NL and NM Pajero diesels sit between $5,000 and $12,000. The sweet spot is a one-owner example with a full-service folder and between 150 and 200,000 kilometers. At that mileage, the major expenses have already been absorbed by the previous owner, and you are buying into what is typically the most reliable phase of the 4M41's operating life. Number 2, the Isuzu Jackaroo, 1992 to 2002, engine, the 4JG2. I want you to think about something for a moment. Isuzu currently charges $65,000 for a new D-Max. The D-Max is considered one of the most reliable diesel utes available in Australia right now. Workshop data backs that up. Fleet operators trust it. The four-wheel drive community respects it. And the reason all of that is true is the same reason it has always been true. Isuzu builds diesel engines for commercial trucks first and passenger vehicles second. The commercial truck application demands a level of engineering conservatism that the passenger car world simply does not require. Now, what if I told you that you could access that same Isuzu commercial truck engineering DNA in a genuine four-wheel drive wagon for between $4,000 and $9,000? What if I told you that vehicle has been sitting in the Australian used market, largely ignored, for the last 15 years, specifically because it wears a badge that most buyers associate with light trucks and tippers, rather than weekend touring, the Isuzu Jackaroo? Or, depending on the year and the market, the Holden Jackaroo, the Isuzu Trooper, or the Vauxhall Frontera if you somehow ended up in the wrong conversation. In Australia it was primarily sold as the Jackaroo, and in Australia it was primarily ignored, which is the single greatest gift the Australian used car market has ever given to the people paying attention. The 4JG2 is a 3.1 litre, naturally aspirated indirect injection diesel, no turbocharger, no emissions equipment, no DPF, no EGR. It breathes clean air, burns diesel at conservative pressures, and exhausts everything without restriction. It produces approximately 72 kilowatts of power, which sounds feeble until you realize that the engine is also producing substantial low-end torque from idle, and the Jackaroo itself is not a particularly heavy vehicle by modern standards. It moves it with confidence. The part story on the 4JG2 is perhaps the greatest selling point of this entire vehicle. Because this engine runs in Isuzu N-Series light commercial trucks, that means every Isuzu truck dealer in Australia stocks components for this engine as a commercial parts necessity. You are not chasing obscure heritage parts through specialist suppliers. You are walking into a truck parts counter in any regional town and buying off the shelf. Injectors, filters, belts, tensioners, water pumps, all of it commercially available, commercially priced, and commercially stocked. I've spoken to a fleet manager in regional South Australia who ran 4 Jackaroos as farm support vehicles for 8 years. He told me that in 8 years and an aggregate distance across the 4 vehicles of over 1.4 million kilometres, he had one head gasket on one vehicle and a starter motor on another. That was the total unplanned expenditure: one head gasket and a starter motor across 4 trucks over 1.4 million kilometres. Let that sink in for a moment. The weak points: the 4JG2 cooling system needs to be maintained correctly. Fresh coolant matters. The timing belt is a service item, not a lifetime component. Replace it at the specified interval. which is typically around 100,000 kilometers, and budget between $800 and $1,200 for the belt, tensioner, and water pump as a combined service. Skip it, and you have a non-interference engine that will simply stop rather than destroy itself, but you are still going to be stranded and paying for a roadside service. The independent front suspension on the Jackaroo is sophisticated for its era and requires periodic attention to the lower ball joints and the CV boots. This is not a structural problem, it is a maintenance reality. Budget for it and manage it, and the suspension is actually a very capable setup. Buy price between $4,000 and $9,000 for a clean diesel example in Australia right now. The very fact that you can buy Isuzu commercial truck reliability for the price of a decent second-hand jet ski is either the greatest automotive secret in this country or the greatest automotive injustice, depending on how you look at it. Number 1. The Ford Maverick and Nissan Terrano, 1993 to 2000. Engine, the TD27. I know what you are thinking. You are thinking, what? I sat through this entire video and the number 1 pick is a Ford Maverick? You have lost your mind, mate. Stick with me, because this is the one that is going to make the mechanics in the comments section nod slowly and the trend chasers absolutely lose their minds. The Ford Maverick in Australia, not to be confused with the current American mini truck, also called the Maverick, was a compact 4-wheel drive wagon sold here from 1993. It is basically invisible in the current market. You see them occasionally, you do not recognize them. Your eyes just sort of slide off them the way they slide off a beige wall. They have no visual drama. No aggressive wheel arches, no snorkel poking above the roofline, no lift kit, no overlanding culture around them. They are just there, quietly existing. And underneath that completely forgettable exterior is the Nissan TD27, a 2.7 litre, naturally aspirated indirect injection diesel inline 4-cylinder. This is the engine that powered the Nissan Terrano, the Nissan Caravan, and various Nissan commercial applications throughout the 1980s and 1990s. Nissan designed the TD27 for commercial duty. They designed it for high cycle, high mileage, low maintenance fleet environments. They designed it to run on fuel that would make a modern common rail system seize in protest. The TD27 has one of the most overbuilt bottom-end architectures of any diesel engine in its displacement class from that era. The main bearing journals are massive relative to the block. The connecting rods are forged rather than cast. The cylinder walls are thick enough that you can bore this engine out during a rebuild and still have plenty of material remaining. It is not a small, precise, performance-oriented diesel. It is an agricultural diesel in the best possible sense. It was built to run. Workshop data on TD27 powered vehicles is compelling. These engines regularly reach 300,000 to 400,000 kilometers with nothing more than oil changes, fuel filter replacements, and the occasional glow plug. At high mileage, the injection pump can develop a slight weep from the front seal. This is about a $200 fix at any diesel specialist. The timing chain stretches slowly over time, producing a rattle on cold start that is easily addressed before it progresses to anything serious. The reason I've put this at number 1 is not purely the engine, as impressive as the TD27 is. It is the combination of the engine and the market reality. The Ford Maverick badge in Australia means this platform is almost completely off the radar of the average buyer. You will not find them attracting bidding wars on car sales websites. You will not find influencers reviewing them on YouTube. You will not find any automotive trend whatsoever pushing their prices upward. What you will find is that you can buy a mechanically sound TD27 powered Maverick or Terrano for between $3,000 and $7,000. And you will find that when you drive it away from whoever sold it to you, probably someone who inherited it from a parent who bought it new, you will have a vehicle that costs almost nothing to run, costs almost nothing to fix, and will return every dollar of basic maintenance investment with mechanical reliability that modern engineering cannot replicate at any price. The four-wheel drive system on the Maverick and Terrano is a part-time system with a manual transfer case. It is simple, it is bomb-proof. When it breaks, which is rarely, it is inexpensive. The suspension is straightforward and robust. The brake system is entirely analog and rebuildable with basic tools. There is nothing on this vehicle that cannot be diagnosed without a computer. There is nothing on this vehicle that requires a specialist diagnostic tool. There is nothing on this vehicle that the dealership has a monopoly on fixing. It is completely, beautifully, mechanically transparent. Before I let you go, let us talk briefly about how to actually buy one of these trucks without becoming the cautionary tale in someone else's video. The single most important thing you can do when buying any of the vehicles on this list is to find the service history. I am not talking about a logbook with 3 stamps in it. I am talking about receipts, invoices, a folder with actual evidence that oil was changed at regular intervals, that coolant was maintained, that filters were replaced. A high kilometer engine that has been serviced correctly is infinitely safer to buy than a low kilometer engine with no documented history. The odometer tells you how far it went. The service folder tells you whether it went that far with its internals looked after. Get a pre-purchase inspection from an independent mechanic, not the seller's mechanic, your mechanic. Spend $150 on a proper inspection that puts the vehicle on a hoist, checks the engine bay, checks for oil leaks, checks the diff fluids, checks the transfer case, listens to the engine at operating temperature. $150 spent before you buy is worth 10 times that amount in avoided surprises. Check the coolant, pull the radiator cap on a cold engine. The coolant should be clean and the correct color for its specification. If it is brown, rusty, or has a milky foam around the cap, walk away immediately. That is a head gasket or a cracked liner, and neither is a quick fix. And check the oil, pull the dipstick. The oil should be dark but fluid. If it is thick, black, and gummy, it has been neglected. If it smells strongly of diesel, the engine has been doing DPF burn-offs incorrectly, which does not apply to most of the engines on this list, but is worth knowing. If the dipstick comes out looking like chocolate mousse, put the cap back on, hand the keys back to the seller, and walk directly to your car without stopping to be polite. Here is the truth that the modern automotive industry has spent billions of dollars trying to obscure. Reliability was never a technology problem. It was never something that required lane departure assist or a 10-speed automatic or a 48-volt hybrid system to achieve. Real reliability, the kind that keeps you moving when you are 800 kilometers from the nearest town, has always come from the same place: engineering conservatism, mechanical simplicity, and the refusal to ask small components to do work they were never designed to handle. The 5 trucks on this list represent something more than cheap transport. They represent a philosophy of ownership that the modern dealership model has deliberately tried to eliminate. Because a vehicle you can fix yourself with parts you can buy at a truck counter using skills you can learn from a workshop manual is a vehicle that does not need a dealership. And a vehicle that does not need a dealership is a vehicle that does not make anyone any money after the day you bought it. That is not an accident. That is a business model. If you own one of these trucks, if you have got a TB42 ticking over at 400,000 kilometers or a 1HZ that has outlived 2 sets of owners, I want to hear about it. Drop it in the comments below, because those stories are worth more than any manufacturer's brochure. They are real. They happened, and they are exactly the kind of evidence that helps the next person make a smarter decision than the one the finance manager had planned for them. Hit subscribe if you want more of this. No sponsored content, no manufacturer relationships, no softened truths, just what I've actually seen in 20 years of working on these trucks, and I will see you in the next one.